Mr. Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions. So you just said this, so that's why I'm going to touch on this one first, that the county would have to approve the user, correct?
I said, right, through the
Board of
county.
Supervisors, right?
Board of Supervisors, through the county administrator. Yes, sir.
What does that process look like? For the people who don't know, because I know what it is, but for the people who don't know, what's that process like? Does it require you to come and have another public hearing like this, or is that something that happens in a different way?
Well, Mr. Carroll, I think it would be in a slightly different way. It does require a public hearing and coming before the board with respect to the Polite Parkway. It would not require a public hearing, at least what we've proffered and had proffered conditions, but it would be through Economic Development Office, which is your department, and the county administrator, who's your representative as well, that you hire and then you give policies to. And so the answer would become, you could set that policy specifically to say, we want a user to come back and talk to us about whether that's a user that we would like or not.
And I'm sorry, you have to be the one that I have to address these questions to,
Sure.
but you've been the one who's been appointed to act on behalf of us, right? And I have great respect for all of my colleagues on this board. But as we know, with other developments like this, and they're probably a lot more successful than people know, but that being said, Meadowville has taken a long time to come out of the ground. And there have been different people that have served on this Board of Supervisors over time that have made those decisions on that particular development. And depending on who's sitting in the seat is going to depend what's going to get decided. Now, my colleagues here, I trust them. They may have the right, they may absolutely, if we all work together with staff, make the right decision. But depending on who gets elected and who sits in those seats, we don't know how that's going to look.
Sure.
And this is the Matoka district, my district,
Yes, sir.
the people that I represent. And so I have concerns, not necessarily in the immediate, because I think that for the first time in years, and I'm speaking to the community now, you actually have some people who are actually looking at Matoka saying, we have a lot of problems with infrastructure out here. We actually have a road that we got to get built. And we're trying to find a way to do that because for 30 years, no one's done it. And it was part of this first Magnolia case,
Right.
and no one lifted a finger. Now, I'm not trying to throw the previous boards under the bus because they also had bad economic times, and they didn't have the developments come out of the ground that are out there now, like Mag Green and Harper's Mill and other ones, that are necessitating this. And then I also know that there's $400 million, $4 billion in unfunded road needs in Chesterfield County, as told to me by staff. We're going to add to it. And the question is, and again, they all have districts to represent too. To tell me that there's not going to be traffic issues that need to be addressed in these other districts in the future, and that someone else may have a different perspective on how that can be handled, I find that hard to believe. The other question I have is related to, well, I have so many questions. Why would we not put in this case some other uses, for example, a hospital? I've asked for that. It's not in the case. Why would we not put in this case that the Polite Parkway would have to be built from the north-south, not from the south-north, which is what's proffered in here? Because if, in the future, other people decide to do this differently, and the money doesn't come to build the Polite Parkway, but we build roads in from Hull Street and allow this type of development to take place, we are going to make a bigger problem out of Hull Street than we already have. So I'm sorry that you're the one who's got to stand there and answer the questions, but there's a lot of uncertainty that's going on with this case right now in my mind. I'll defer back to you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Saley.
Mr. Chair. With all due respect, and commenting on some of Mr. Carroll's comments, there have been years this board, prior to my service, have been talking about the extension of Polite Parkway. That conversation has gone on a regional basis, and candidly, folks, there has never been the ability to find funding to the extent that is necessary to fund that extension. It's why the right-of-way or the map has shown where that extension is deemed to go. And so it's not for lack of attention to that, nor regional cooperation about the amount of money it's going to take. And the opportunity that exists, number one, for us to have, by purchase of this land, acquire a significant amount of that right-of-way is an incredible plus. In addition to that, the fact that we, meaning just Chesterfield, doesn't come to the table alone with a project like this, but we come to the table with partners that extend beyond just those from the chamber that have spoken with us, but those from the state level. And as was introduced this afternoon by our, in our legislative update, we have had commitments at every level, bipartisan commitments of folks that are looking at this opportunity to come to us with monies through federal and state infrastructure dollars that are on the table right now. And so those letters of support, which I'm going to, challenge each of you to go back and look at the commentary from this afternoon, are opportunities that have never existed. And so we are poised to make sure that we are out in front of that, but we are not out in front of that with 1,400 homes, because that's not going to happen. So this conversation is not, and can't be held in isolation, because road networking takes years and years and years, and so what you're seeing going on, for instance, right now on Otterdale, has been in the works for a long time and just coming to fruition. So, that conversation is just, we would be not talking fairly if we were telling you that, we can build Powhite Parkway, that Chesterfield can build that Powhite Parkway extension on our own. 20 years we've been talking about it, hasn't happened. 20 more, it's not going to happen. Is it needed? It's needed, but that conversation's been happening. So I just want to be clear about road networking and kind of where we are and how important that this aspect of looking at Powhite at this point in time is on the table.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, yeah, I have to concur with my colleague. I've heard about Powhite extension for years, and she's absolutely right. This, in my opinion, has probably been the best opportunity for, certainly come on back up, I have a question for you as well. This has probably been, this has been, to my knowledge, the only opportunity we've come even close to realizing that goal here in Chesterfield County, and to alleviate the pressures that are faced out there. My question is, with regard to requests earlier for remain or defer, what is the benefit? And I never remain or defer anything unless there's a definitive benefit for doing so. Sometimes I consider those opportunities to delay, defeat, but what's in essence will be the benefit given the timeline I've looked at here on this case starting February 2020, with the many, many hearings and statements made about this. And of course, I've met with every group conceivable, which I said I would. And just last week, I spent over an hour on this case as well with a concerned group for the most part. But what benefit will we derive from such a delay or deferral?
Right. I would say that anytime there's a question for delay or deferral, there's two things that we can accomplish. One is to provide further information. I truly do not know what other information. Every time a speaker said, there's more things that we need to figure out, there's nothing that we're going to be able to figure out until we get to the point of going through the site plan process. And we can't get to that until we get to the zoning. And so I don't see anything that we're able to accomplish with that. The other thing is whether there's some other further compromise. We've been talking to and hearing the comments from the staff as well as the community. We've taken those to heart, we've analyzed them. I just don't see any other changes that can be made to the case at this point. And so with those points, I just don't see any reason for deferral at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Conlon? Mr. Carroll.
Thanks, sir. I want to clarify a comment.
Okay.
I haven't been on the board as long as Ms. Haley or Ms. Winslow or Mr. Holland. So there probably was other conversations that have happened in the past about the Poway Parkway. But I've never seen a Board of Supervisors in open have a discussion like this about the Board of about building the Poway Parkway. I've not seen them hold the community meetings and talk about building the Poway Parkway. I've not seen that. And I've been in the county for 38 years, something like that. I've been around.
Yeah.
I just haven't been on this side of the table. I've been on that side.
Yeah.
And what Ms. Haley said is absolutely correct. This is a lift that Chesterfield County cannot do alone.
Right.
When you talk about building that type of road, nor all of the other roads, as one of the speakers brought up, with the cost of all of the proffers in this case.
Right.
So my question to you as a private developer, do you think that the Board of Supervisors would pass this case if you brought a case forward with the amount of traffic proffers with no money to pay for it as part of what you as a developer would be doing?
I think that the case that's being presented tonight, we would present the same case, and I have presented, certainly not to this scale from an industrial development. I'm doing a development proposal in a neighboring county that is a $500 million project in which we're asking for zoning, and then we're going to be working with VDOT through the Smart Scale program and the locality and the federal funds to help improve an interchange. That's what there's no funding specifically for that at this time, but we're going to do it as part of the design, and we're going to ask for that to come forward. So the answer is yes, that we've done that, and we would expect
I
it's
think
not to
that's
come
been
from.
done in many cases, actually, as far as that goes, that
Right.
There are proffered conditions on about a case where, but what I will say about this is that a developer, if we, to say that we're going to bring somebody in and think that a developer coming in, whether it's a chip manufacturing company or anything else, that they're going to bring to the table
They're
the
not.
amount of money
They're not.
for these roads. It's not
No,
going to
it's going
happen.
to come from state and federal funding, and it's
Right.
part of economic development. When, the folks that went up to Ohio saw a Intel that was potentially coming here, and there were state incentives that went with that, and that's part of what it is. And
One last
that's what
question.
comes with that.
As far as the building height, why not put a restriction on the outer edges of this to reduce the building height to at least 80 feet, which was requested? Why do we have to have 150 feet for the entire property?
Well, part of it is that it's off of the buffer, including the 200, but also the 750 where it is, provides for the necessary distance. And while it's not going to cover the entirety of a potential 150, it's going to be unique and unusual to get to that level, but it provides a flexibility for specific users, as we talked about the mechanization of a lot of these facilities, that they need to have the room to be able to have that. And it's, they're in offices as well, like to have that kind of distances. So
You're a pretty experienced fellow. I think the concern that the people have, quite frankly, is both noise pollution and light pollution. And the higher up you go, the closer you are to the property, the more that could be. But is there a way to mitigate, for example, air conditioning coolers on top of a 150-foot building that are running?
Yeah,
Is there a
well,
way to put soundproofing to address that
we've
issue?
got screening issues, and that could go through the site plan process where you could provide for that, but we've got screening requirements in our proffers already. And those screening, certainly, from that standpoint, that helps with the noise abatement. And that could happen through the plan process as well. Again, the interesting thing is if this were a private developer owning the private land, the answer would be not as strong from that standpoint. It would be specifically written as you have. But as you come in and bring in new people, you guys are the owners. You guys being the county administrator, being the EDA, you still have a say, if not a veto on that, to say, this is how I want this developed. This is how high it's going to be. I'm concerned about its location. This is what I want as part of that. And that would be part of the analysis that you would be able to provide for, which you would not in any other case.